Right now, it's time to bring in Jim Lynch and cover your assets. Jim is an independent voice on Wall Street. He, of course, has many different irons in the fire over the course of his life. He's a voice on the Wall Street, the economy, politics, and also sports. And he joins us on a Tuesday morning. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. Another beautiful day. Let's enjoy it. Let's soak in that sun. How are you doing, Marshall? Pitch and catch with the baseball season about to start.
I'm glad that it's. I'm glad that that they came together. Baseball made the right decision because every time they went on strike, they lost more people that want to go to games, and with the cost of what it goes to games now, believe you me, they didn't want this to happen. So I'm glad that we're going to see baseball and spring training is there, because spring training is a sure sign of spring. That it melts even if we get snow. The boys are playing baseball under the sun.
Amen. Amen. Okay, let's enjoy some of this good news. We have our challenges, certainly mentally and psychologically, but we are Americans, and particularly here on the East Coast, we're very strong. New York, Connecticut, Boston. So we're going to get through this, and let's look at a few things. Interest rates have been coming down now for several weeks or more. The Federal Reserve meets today and will make an announcement tomorrow. It'll probably be that they're going to raise rates by 1/4%. The key going forward would be, will they mitigate their vocalization of a month ago that they were going to have about 4 or 5 rate increases in the short end during the year. If that changes, that might stabilize the bond market a little. However, the bond market is going lower. Inflation is driving it. Actually, we've had some great successes here that, unfortunately, the American public probably don't really understand. But because Joe Biden and his team basically spent all his money to bail us out of the pandemic, not that it's through, it increased not only the amount of money that individuals have gotten, which is great, they're saving at a tremendous rate, but it has also increased tax revenues at the state level and at the government level. We've gone from a big deficit in the government level last year to a deficit even to plus, and the state legislations are choking with money. So Joe Biden and his team deserve a lot of accolade and an admiration of their courage to do a very aggressive spending, which indeed is causing some of this inflation, just some. Most of this inflation, in my opinion, is caused by supply problems, which have erupted because of the pandemic, because of so many people leaving the workforce, and because more and more people are getting interested now that they have a few more bucks in their pocket in quality meats and vegetables. These things, in terms of food inflation, can be very short-lived. It doesn't take a lot for the farmers to go to the banks and borrow a little extra money to plant more and feed more cows and so forth. It is something to be considered, something to plan for, something to deal with, but it's nowhere near the problem we would have had if Biden and his team didn't do some pretty terrific things in terms of spending money. His playbook is double or triple what it was during the Obama situation in 08 and 09 when we had real estate collapse. And the government stepped in, supported the market, the corporations. We got out of that. And on March 9th of the following year, I beg your pardon, March my wife will kill me. March 10th, 2009. She'll kill me because that's our anniversary. A guy named Mark Haynes called the market bottom, and the market has been ever and onward up. The market in 2009 was 7,000 on the Dow Jones. It subsequently, as you know, went to 36,000. It then, as you know, because of the pandemic, went to 18,000. And then because the government stepped up spending and helping the economy, helping individuals, helping the sick, it shot up from 18,000 to 36,000. Our view on the market changed pretty significantly a couple of months ago in terms of selling it. It's down about 10, 15%, depending on the average. We maintain that position because so many things are happening that make it difficult and confusing for corporations, never mind individuals. So our posture is continue to lighten up on stocks until you know you're extremely comfortable that you're champing at the bit. And also sell long bonds, 5 years and longer, sell long bonds. We're going to have a need for a tremendous amount of financing over the next several years because of all the money we're currently spending to thankfully help out Ukraine and help out our own citizens. So I think we have to understand something that, you know, we've let the right-wing nuts take away from Joe Biden. Joe Biden has done a tremendous job. He hasn't done a perfect job. Afghanistan, he goofed, but at least we got the hell out of it. A 20-year war that Republicans started and continued. Anyhow, that's it for the moment. Marshall?
I have a question for you. There's a, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know the ins and outs of the Fed, but I do know over the course of years of looking at politics and looking at the Fed and how it interacts with the president of the United States, whether it's Republican or Democratic. These small incremental interest rate hikes, they have to be careful with that because could not that turn inflation into a recession if they move along too quick?
If they move too quickly, absolutely. However, as I'm pointing out earlier in the conversation, the Fed is a very conservative animal, and they don't do draconian things. And it took Powell a long, long time to even get to this place of raising 25 basis points because he was very sensitive to the problems we are having courtesy of the pandemic, physically, healthfully, and business-wise. So he's a good, solid guy. He'll do it slowly but surely. And, you know, the Fed can always adjust. If they say, well, hey, we're going to do 4 to 5 times during the year, they mean that, but they have it in their power. That's not signing a bill like in Congress. That's a decision they've made and shared with the American public. And if 6 months into this thing, it looks like it's going south a little bit, they'll adjust. They'll say, okay, fine. It's over for now. Relax in terms of the tightening. The key thing is that we need to maintain an overall healthy economy, which means growing it, but preserving it, not letting it get away from us because of inflation. And the oil situation, I've learned, being over 25 years of age, that we must learn from everything that is happening in life that's meaningful to us, be it the economy or our health and so forth. And we really must realize out of this tremendous problem we're having in the world, in Europe, in Ukraine, it's terrible, but there will be a plus out of this from the United States. The United States is already doing a lot more in wind power and gas and solar. That will continue. The policy that Biden wanted, which was cut emissions and so forth, that's going to go full steam ahead as we get out of this war situation. because we do not want to be dependent on anybody for our energy. It's devastating. We can see that happening through Ukraine, where the Russians are turning off the power. We're not going to let that happen to us. So the leadership here is very, very important. And the fly in the ointment, and it's more like a maggot, is the right wing, the Republican Party, that is feasting on disinformation, which is confusing millions of citizens who have been pro-Trump, are now probably wondering what they should do. But then they hear from Tucker Carlson, oh, well, Ukraine has these biochemical things. They do not. It's fact, okay? It's fact that Fox News can lie like this. This guy Murdoch, who we gave him a spot as an immigrant, and look how he has turned on this country. By the way, Tucker Carlson might begin to focus on a couple of Fox News people have been wounded over there. They weren't wounded by the Ukrainians. They were wounded by the Russians. So, but people out there, as you're talking to friends, and I know sometimes arguments ensue, but people have got to come around to the reality they are living in the greatest democracy ever, and they cannot allow themselves to be conned out of that wonderful right by people who lust for power, namely the Republican Party, who'll do anything. The Republican Party, a good portion of it, supports a pedophile, a fraud, a criminal, a gangster, a bully. His name is Donald Trump. The Republican Party supports certain people in the House who are disgrace to humanity, never mind womanhood, as well as some young men who haven't served a day in their life, but they call Zelensky a thug. I'd love this kid, 27 years old, Cartwright, to meet Zelensky in the street, and we'll see how much he thinks he's a thug.
Also, what people forget is today's economy in the United States, and actually throughout the world, they're different than they were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, your economy basically stood on its own. Now there's a world economy, and along with the war in Ukraine, along with coming out of 2 years of COVID, along with supply chain problems in China, there is a shutdown in a section of the country which produces most of the goods. So what happens elsewhere now has an impact on everybody else's economy. It's not like it was 30, 40 years ago where there would be a slight impact. When you have something like that goes on in China, and one of their major industrial areas has a complete lockdown, that has an effect also on the world, along with the Ukraine and everything else.
Right. That's right. That's why I mentioned about we need to become more independent when it comes to energy, which is so crucial to everything we do on the consumer level and on the corporate level. And by the same token, just switching a little bit on China, the Russians have asked for military aid from China. Beijing is 3,500 miles from Russia. It's one heck of a trip to take weapons and so forth. Russia, if you're listening, you're going to have to pay for those things because the Chinese are not pansies. They're not going to give it to you. The other thing is regarding the Russians, they are running right now because of the war and the restrictions and the money they're foolishly spending. They have a deficit of $150 billion. So I'm going to say something which is kind of a joke, but I enjoy saying it. When it gets to $1 trillion, maybe the Western world should say, okay, China, not China, okay, Russia, we're going to give you a bid. We're going to buy the country. And, you got to step down, Putin, and no more of this and no more of that. It's just a joke, folks, but, strange things can happen when it comes to money. And these oligarchs, the guys that will eventually start pulling the strings in Russia, these guys are worth trillions of dollars among them. They've had the highlight. Their kids are in colleges in the U.S. They have a family in various places in the free world. How much more pressure are they going to take from these sanctions? How much more pressure are they going to take from Putin destroying or attempting to destroy Ukraine, but in the process is destroying Russia? And I don't know. I feel a lot better here in the last couple of weeks because I feel like inwardly I'm fighting in a very good way. And I guess I'm very inspired by Zelensky, who leads the Ukraine. What an example of the great human spirit. And we should all be proud of him as Europeans, because at one time a lot of us were Europeans, and then we came here.
Well, let's just look at the Ukraine and look at their history. You go back to World War II, and a little before then, it was a very anti-Semitic country, okay? And it was a very... It was a totally different place than it is now. And the advances in the Ukraine that has made on the world stage all have come since the fall of the USSR, where all these satellite states were part of the United Soviet Socialist Republic, dropped off and became their own states. Now, Putin has started on a goal years ago to get those states back, but just look at, that's the one thing I want people to look at Ukraine. Ukraine is a far different place now than it was when Russia collapsed. And it has become, there's so much potential in the Ukraine on the world stage to become a major player. This is why Putin chose them to go next. I mean, they have natural resources that are amazing, which I think all the natural resources that they have are always within the either number 1, 2, 3, or 4 slot in the world. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the EU. We have a couple of members of the European Union flying in to Ukraine to speak to Zelensky. I give those two members a lot of credit. They're flying in to speak and talk with Zelensky. Ukraine has done amazing things over the past 20 years. It's terrible to see it all trying to be washed away.
Just a little history, which I just came upon. And the reason I just came upon it was because a fellow named Joseph Stalin hid that information. In 1932, the Ukraine was the wheat belt, the supply of wheat to all of Europe. Very, very rich. And basically, Joseph Stalin, a terrible, terrible man, decided he wanted to take over Ukraine, to take the wheat, and basically he wanted them to become Russians. This is 1932. In the process, Joseph Stalin killed millions of Ukrainians. In addition, Joseph Stalin hid the deaths, burned the corpses, changed whatever information or notes were available. Somehow, the spirit of the Ukrainian people lived on. But if you look at the horror that they were hit with, it's incredible. In terms of the anti-Semite viewpoint that country had, that began to be built by Stalin's Russians who were put into the Ukraine. In other words, the millions that died, Ukrainians, were replaced by Russians. It's the same old Russian playbook. Destroy the current populace, take over the country, and install your own puppets. This is what Putin right now is trying to do. Now, Stalin, when you think of the evil people we've had, Stalin, Hitler, Trump, Putin, it's really amazing. But that's part of whatever it is life is all about. There's always some kind of thing like this. But anyhow, count our blessings. The Ukrainians have maintained their spirit. And I would like to see the young people in the United States of America get a little bit of that loyalty, a little bit of that gratefulness for what they have, their land, their government, their people. We have a bunch of selfish young people in this country. You can see it with the young Republicans visiting places in Europe with this kind of autocratic kind of idea. What is wrong with these people? They've been educated, supposedly. Did they learn anything? Did they take any history course? We have to be very careful of our youth, that we do not allow them to succumb to the lies they're being told by people in this country. Forget the Russians and others, but people in this country, Fox News, a purveyor of evil.
Well, with that note, we are out of time, Jim.
Well, somehow I kind of relish that note. It's like when you play an instrument and you're not too good, but then all of a sudden you hit the right note.
It's like when you golf. You can shoot 130, but when you hit that one shot that's sweet and is beautiful, it brings you back the next day.
On that.
All right,
Good
Jim.
to talk to you, my friend.
I'll speak to you next week.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah,
All right.
bye-bye. Jim Lynch and Cover Your Assets here on Robin Hood Radio. A reminder, opinions expressed on Cover Your Assets and other editorial shows that are on Robin Hood Radio are those of the people that give them. They are not necessarily those of Tri-State Public Communications, WHDD, CATV 6 or CATV 252, or the Bargain Barn, all under the auspices of Tri-State Public Communications. All right? All right. Those are the ground rules that we set.